Hey there, I'm Maddie Gardner at WBTV's News Now desk. If you've been to the grocery store lately, really if you've been shopping at all, you've probably noticed that the shelves are missing a few key items. You've been hearing a lot about the supply chain. Maybe you've been told to buy those holiday presents early. Well, that's the question that WBTV's Alex Giles is asking this week. What's going on with the supply chain, and specifically, why are there so few truck drivers? He is the host of WBTV's Good Question podcast. Alex, thank you again for joining us today to talk about this episode.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Maddie.
So what is the question, and what were you trying to find out this week?
We were trying to learn more about truck drivers and why we've been hearing that there's fewer truck drivers on the roads. Obviously, there are a lot of components to the whole supply chain shortage issue that's facing the country right now, but we knew one cog in the big machine was the truck drivers, and the fact that we've been hearing that there were fewer truck drivers on the roads. So we talked to two people out of Texas, Austin and Sierra, who work for Elite Trade Academy, and they work in the trucking industry, and they work to recruit and train new truck drivers. And so we wanted to ask them a little bit about the industry, about what they've been seeing with truck drivers on the roads right now. And we wanted to ask them how the pandemic had impacted that field of work.
And so did they say that there are, in fact, fewer truck drivers?
Yeah, I want people to obviously listen to the conversation in the podcast episode. But yeah, we asked them straight up, are you guys, hearing that there are fewer truck drivers on the roads? Are there less truck drivers right now? They said yes, that they believe that there are fewer truck drivers on the road. And that's part of the problem and part of the issue with getting things to stores, getting items to the grocery stores. They believe that's part of the issue when it comes to the supply chain backlog.
So I pulled a couple of clips from the podcast. We'll start with this first one that's talking about that exactly, Alex.
Okay.
You actually see, out on the streets, or whether you're talking to people in the industry, are there really less drivers out there? Is there a shortage?
Absolutely. I'm sure you guys have walked into your store, your local, Kroger, and, the shelves are not as full as what they used to be a few years ago. And a part of that is because, there's just not enough trucks on the road to bring products to the consumer. And, right now there's about a shortage of 60,000 drivers. And by 2023, they're saying it'll be around 100,000 drivers needed on the road. So we have definitely been heavily impacted over the last year or so, especially due to the pandemic.
Personally noticed when you go to the grocery stores and you see, oh, wow, there's a lot of that item just missing on the shelves right now. And then you just kind of remember, oh, yeah, we're dealing with the supply chain issues. And obviously it makes sense that if there are fewer drivers out there, then it's harder to get products to the stores. And that in turn, comes back on the consumers. When we go to the stores and look to buy things and don't see them, you got to remember that this is a big system. And it's something that I think a lot of people probably took for granted for several years because there weren't a ton of disruptions. But then you hear about, something happens with the Colonial Pipeline, for instance, and all of a sudden it becomes difficult to get gasoline. So that's just an example. And now we're seeing it on a wide scale. And I believe the pandemic does have a big part to play in that.
And I think you said it exactly right there. It's something you don't really think about until it affects you. But your expert said that this is not something that happened overnight. This has kind of been building up for a while.
Right. This has been something that, has kind of been a process. Obviously, truck drivers, there's a shortage right now, but in general, we were kind of asking them about young people becoming truck drivers. And one of the things that they mentioned was, marketing to young people, because I think a lot of people have like a set demographic in their mind when they think of a truck driver. You think male, you think older, you don't necessarily think of somebody younger being a truck driver. And so they said, part of the issue might just be marketing to younger people. I thought that was interesting, Maddie.
I thought it was interesting as well. And they said that a lot of people really get out of the business pretty soon because it's less of a job and more of a lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. And I know there are different career paths like that. And some people say that about journalism. It's like you got to be ready for the grind that comes with, having that as your occupation. It's more than just a job. And obviously truck drivers, are on the roads for, long periods of time in some cases, depending on where you're picking up and where you're delivering to and how far your route is. So yeah, you can tell how something that's just a career could easily impact your whole life.
Well, I really love this week's episode. It was eye-opening. I learned a lot from it. I encourage people, of course, to listen to that. You talked not only about why there is a shortage, but what people are doing to combat it, solutions to that, and even the demographics of truck driving, which, Alex, I thought was fascinating. Just who is driving those trucks, men, women, the ages. That was great.
it was eye-opening for me too. You know, I learn a lot doing these episodes, and talking to people who have expertise in, you know, truck driving was not something I had honestly ever done before. So I learned a lot during it too. And I thought it was interesting. And obviously we're seeing how the supply chain issues are impacting everyone. So especially these days, it was very timely too.
Alex, always good to talk to you. Tell the people how they can listen to WBTV's Good Question.
You can look for WBTV's Good Question on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. This is the most recent episode. So when you search for WBTV's Good Question, this should be the one at the top of the list.